Hello, and welcome back. It's Corona with Lime live. It is Monday, May 11th. We are now 2 months or so into this nonsense. And with me here is Adam Levi. Adam, how you doing, man?
Dude, I am so fantastic. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
You know, it is just one day blurring into the next. Um, I feel like the last couple of weeks were kind of getting a little bit rough. I feel like somehow this is all just starting to feel normal ish.
Hmm.
um, Still frustrating that we can't do things like go out to restaurants or bars or to shows or anything else, but um, it is, so far, so good. Surviving slowly, but surely.
Yeah.
It's been tough. How about you? What's your week been like? It's been a week since we've been on the air. What have you been up to?
Yeah. Just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I finished up my patio now,
Nice,
uh, with some help from a lovely lady.
perfect,
We got the patio finished up and got everything down. So we did some black mulch under the two trees, and then we cleared out
nice.
the rest of the area and did some crushed white marble. So it's got this like really nice the contrast between like the black mulch and the white marble. So I'm really excited about it. Now I just need to get some furniture out there, and I think it is going to be stupendous.
That's amazing. I think one of my favorite things about the show is checking in on your landscaping work every week. I
Well,
have
it keeps me going, so thank you.
I
I
have
appreciate
really enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean that's like what a great quarantine activity, right? Just like if you can't leave your house, if you only just go outside for a little bit, like why not like put around in your yard? And black mulch is really hot right now.
it. Yeah,
That's a big thing. We're
I
about to
wanted
do a
to be
big
in.
right. No, I yeah. Well, you want to be in the one of the cool kids, right? I
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're about to do a big landscaping project at our house, and I'm advocating for a big black mulch element as well. I think it looks great in our neighborhood. It's very popular. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, right? So yeah, but like getting into today, our today's episode is going to be a kind of a revisiting of a topic we've done before on this show, which is conspiracy theories.
Da-da-da-da.
Hence my conspiracy background today.
Sure.
Um, and I think Adam and I went back and forth about this over the weekend a little bit because we weren't sure if we really wanted to like revisit this as a topic. Like, is it like we kind of just did this? Do we want to do it again? But last week there was a big development in the conspiracy space, and I thought it would be silly if since this is a show about living with the coronavirus, if we didn't at least address it a little.
Sure.
So tonight we have some people coming on who have some thoughts and feelings about this on different sides of the spectrum, and it'll be interesting to hear their takes. But of course, as always, we want to start with the news. So we'll get right into that. Let's see here. All right. So first up, we were last on the air May 4th. That was a week ago today. So the total cases at the time was 1,152,372, according to the CDC. Total deaths, 67,456. That was 1 week ago. Today is May 11th. That number of total cases has jumped to 1,324,488. And the total deaths so far is just shy of 80,000.
And this is for the U.S. right now.
This is just for the United States, right?
So in 1 week we still had 200,000 cases.
Yeah. So yep, and so it was 1,152,067, and that has gone up about 200,000 cases, and
15,
almost 13,000
15,000
deaths. Yeah.
deaths.
Worldwide, not much better news. Total cases 3.6 million. Worldwide, total deaths 251,822. That was a week ago. Today it is 4,251,168 worldwide, 286,000 deaths worldwide. And again, almost a third of that, just shy of a third of that, all comes just from the United States.
Yep.
So there's that. Um, so like I said, we wanted to get into conspiracy theories tonight. We wanted to talk about this Plandemic documentary. Normally, this part of the show, I would have some slides with some facts and figures on it, but this isn't really a topic that's about facts and figures. and there's no like meaningful data like what the reach of this whole thing was, or and everyone, like all the research that we're pulling from to talk about it is all very new. This all kind of blew up a week ago, like the day we were filming our last episode. So this is all very fresh, and like as the week kind of unfolded last week, we saw all of this journalism kind of like suddenly very interested in what was going on. BuzzFeed covered it, the Washington Post covered it, New York Times covered it, NPR covered it, like all the big news outlets covered it. It was, and so I thought we should talk about it a little bit tonight. So for those who aren't aware what we're talking about, Plandemic is basically a fake documentary that made the rounds on YouTube, Facebook, and social media last week. It features a scientist named Dr. Judy Mikovits, who used to be an infectious disease researcher, specializing in things like HIV and other infectious diseases. She was discredited because of some really bad stealing and hiding documents that she shouldn't have. And then she went and made a documentary where basically she says that she was forcibly ejected from NIH because she was like going to tell the truth about vaccines to the world. She's a known anti-vaxxer. She goes to anti-vax rallies. She's written a book about the subject, which is currently a #1 bestseller on Amazon right now. It is absolutely full of BS, and I was like, we have to talk about this because it was what was really remarkable is not just that it was like some random conspiracy theory. Remember, Adam, like when we did this a couple weeks ago, we talked about like the 5G cell tower conspiracy, right? And like the Wuhan clinic,
the lab. Yeah.
So Dr. Mikovits in the Plandemic documentary again states that the virus, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 disease caused by the coronavirus, was created in a lab, and makes these ridiculous claims. At one point in the video, she says something like it would take 800 years for a virus like this to occur naturally, which is absolutely not true. It has been debunked vigorously by multiple scientific journals and journalists. So claims like this in a documentary that's this widespread and this widely shared is really dangerous. And one of the things I kind of want to get into is why it is that people would get into something like this. What attracts people to this stuff? And we talked last time about how our friend Booters came on, our therapist friend, and she said, well, people have people trying to like project their anxieties and insecurities onto these stories, try to make sense of it all, right? And so we're going to explore that a little bit tonight. But before we bring on our first guest, Adam, is there anything you wanted to say about any of this, or are you just looking to see what it...
Coming in tonight, we agreed that we were not going to be taking sides on anything that we said here, as we were here to have a holistic conversation. Clearly, right. That seems to not be apparent. So,
I just want to be clear, and yeah, Adam is exactly right. I want to be 100% clear that we're not here to take sides, but there are things that are said in that documentary that are factually untrue, and we're all about truth and what is verifiable data on the show. That's why we use CDC numbers every week for our death counts. That's why we use reliable mainstream sources for all of our information, and we're really hardcore about that. So there are some things in that documentary that are just wildly untrue. On the other hand, there are other things that are mentioned in that documentary that aren't entirely untrue. They're just sort of presented in a way that might be controversial or misconstrued. So Adam is exactly right. We're not here to take sides. We want to hear everyone out, but we do want to make sure that our facts are correct.
Yeah, we're all about having a holistic conversation, right? We want to see all sides of the stories, all sides, people's perspectives, people's opinions, things like that. Everybody has their own thoughts and feelings on the matter. And we're not here to call someone stupid because they think or feel other than somebody else. Like, we're all in this together. And if this is what some people need to make sense of everything, then it's just something that people need to make sense of everything. But
Absolutely.
The conversation we're going to have tonight should be well-rounded. We've got some people who can see things from other sides than perhaps what we see. I'm just here to be an unbiased party, along with Chris, who may or may not be an unbiased party, and we'll have the conversation piece with everyone who cares to join us tonight. And please feel free, if you're in the chats, if you're watching this, and you have comments to make, like, there's no bad comments. Like, it depends. I mean, if you're gonna get on here and call me like a fuckface or something, that might not be the best comment. But other than that, if you have something to share, we'll bring it up on the stream and we'll talk about it. It's no problem.
That's right.
So without further ado, Chris,
without further ado, our next guest has been on the show before, and he is a big triumphant return, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Josh Dinner. How are you, sir?
Josh, oh my gosh, welcome back.
Amazing background game you got going on right now.
It's so dope. What is that, 12 monkeys? I can't tell. I'm just kidding.
We can't hear you, actually. That might be a microphone connection issue. No. That's all right. While Josh is getting his microphone set up, so yeah, no, Adam is exactly right. We want to make sure that this is all balanced and fair. But I also want to make sure that that the facts are coming out, because it's scary. Like, in a time like this, it's weird where so much content gets shared around and stories get shared around, and like the stories coming from the scientific world isn't necessarily always on the same page. So we just want to get things straight and like what separate the fact from the fiction, where the concerns are real, where they're not, and see where that goes.
Can you know what, Chris? I'm gonna throw a huge wrench into tonight's plan, like right now. I'm gonna mix things up a little bit. I want to try to change up this format a little bit for tonight. Impromptu. Why don't we bring everybody in, and why don't we just have a roundtable discussion about this?
Everyone at the same time?
Let's do it. Like, let's talk about a topic and let's all go at it. Kind of like I don't know, just any kind of roundtable discussion. And I think that would be an awesome way to go about this episode.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Josh, is your microphone working?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. Great. There you are. Excellent.
Here now.
Cool. Yeah. No worries at all. Well, yeah, I want to bring everyone in, but before I bring everyone in, there's one thing I do want to talk to Josh about exclusively, and that is one of the big topics that all of the articles, by the way, all of the articles that we're using as primary source material are linked in the description below. Please read those for any background information about this. One of the things you will see in those articles is there's a lot of commentary about the production value of this documentary. It is very, very well made. It's well shot. It's well edited. The music is perfect. The photography is incredible.
So people got paid.
People got paid. Josh here is a documentary filmmaker, a very talented one with whom I've worked on many a project. He is right now finishing a master's degree in science filmmaking. So there is nobody better to talk to about this than Josh. Josh, tell us what your thoughts are about that. How does production value affect the way people consume media?
Well, I think there's an argument to be made that it doesn't. I think that, it can go both ways. So, something that is entirely made up can be shot and produced and look just as good as something that is entirely legitimate. And so, you have, you might have a documentary that is, just great interviews, great lighting, wonderful sound, flashy graphics, and the information that the people talk about perhaps might not be credible. But then you can also have something where, that might seem a little shaky, the quality might be not as good. And then you might just immediately see that and say, well, this is, who did this thing? What
high school kid put this together for as a meme project for TikTok, right?
Yeah. So I hope that
kids do now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am in grad school right now for science and natural history filmmaking, and there's a great variety of films that have been made dealing with science and natural history. Anything that's from shot on low quality digital video, all the way up to, these 8K blue chip documentaries that we see like Planet Earth and things like that. So it definitely runs the gamut.
So this one, Plandemic, though, is like really well produced. I mean, it was clearly,
Yeah.
it was filmed. It was filmed with very high quality cameras. Definitely shot 4K. The lighting was perfect. The editing is very slick, and it's designed to look, and like in the articles that you'll see below, the journalists writing about it make a big point of how it looks, and that its infiltration into social media and people's consciousness came from that, because it looks so professional, even though the facts presented may or may not be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, for me, when you're considering what Plandemic is as a film, I mean, you had mentioned you introduced it as a fake documentary, and I wouldn't categorize it as that. I think it's a real documentary that has probably some real inherent flaws in it, but I don't think we can, you can't.
That's fair.
It's a very successful film if you think about it. I mean, anybody who makes a film and has a message and wants to get out a message, hopes for those kinds of views, hopes for people to put their eyes on it and see it, to spread that message. And so it is very, very successful. What comes to mind, though, when you said fake documentary is that, we all do realize this daily, but we have a real president that's kind of a fake president, who, when we consider this idea of truth and what we should take as truth, we have somebody in a leadership role who's constantly lying about what they did say, what they didn't say. And so we're getting nothing but lies. And I think that opens the door when people have so much uncertainty about what is really happening, that and people being so hungry for just like truthful statements, where it opens the door to question some of these things that we're witnessing.
I think to piggyback on what you're saying, people being thirsty for truthful statements, I think people are thirsty for validation, right? So people have these thoughts and they just want to hear somebody else in a position of whatever power, or somebody who has the ability to make a movie, like somebody who's like, oh man, this is definitely a disease that was created in a lab, like for sure. And then you have a scientist that comes out with a documentary that says, this is why this was created in a lab. And they're like, ultimate validation. Thank you so much for providing this validation. Some people might really want to inject cleansers and disinfectants into their body. And then you get somebody who comes on to national television and says it's okay to do that. Oh my God, ultimate validation. People are thirsty for validation. Like a lot of people are having these thoughts and they're just waiting for others to come out saying they're having the same thoughts too. And I think that's what creates this perfect storm of not knowing what's truthful media and what isn't, because it's just opinion.
They want it to be simple and understandable.
But you have to realize that there have been institutions that have been, have portrayed themselves as truthful authorities on certain topics that have come out in the same way, saying, something was good when in turn, it turns out to be bad. I mean,
sure, I agree.
Referencing another documentary, I mean, there was the documentary about how the Food and Drug Administration, or they went on this low fat, a lot of foods and processed foods came out to be low fat, but then they're higher in sugar for people. And so when somebody sees a label and says, oh, wow, I want to lose 30 pounds, I'll buy this low fat option, and then not realizing that
the sugar makes it worse.
Getting is a whole bunch of sugar calories.
Well, so, that absolutely supports what I'm saying. Like, I think we're arguing the same argument. It's like when you get something like that, they're looking for validation. They're like, I can lose weight. Here's a product that says low fat. That's perfect for me. That's the validation I seek, without doing the appropriate researching and understanding how sugar affects the body, how sugars can lead to fats in the body, how fats can turn to sugars inside the body. Like, the body is very intricate, and just removing something without understanding what the other pieces do, they're all they're all intertwined. You can't just remove something without understanding how it reacts. And that's why people are like validated and they're like, let's do it. And that's why marketing and advertising wins, because people know how to manipulate the thoughts of others. Like they know how to get to people.
Yeah, but I think increasingly people are becoming a lot more on guard and doing their own research. I mean, surely there's a group of people who are basically, like you said, they're gonna, if they hear something that validates a hunch, you might say, I knew it all along. Yeah. But then there's also people who, can watch the Plandemic documentary and can watch conspiracy theory videos, and it really kind of sparks a new idea that takes you on a different road in perhaps some of your own research. And so, I think it's important to have these discussions and ask these questions and not censor, the types of views that people have. I don't think anybody on face value, or maybe there are people, but would watch Plandemic and say, everything in there is entirely truthful. I mean, when does that ever happen anymore? But I do want to introduce a term which I came across a while back, but it's called post-positivism. And what post-positivism is, it's a reaction to positivism. And so I'll just describe it really quick. So post-positivism is a meta-theoretical stance that critiques and amends positivism. While positivists believe that the researcher and the research person are independent of each other, post-positivists accept that theories, backgrounds, knowledge, and values of the researcher can influence what is being observed. And so when you think about that, and us going kind of behind the veil in terms of some of this information, perhaps, a research study was done that comes out with, a claim. And then we go back and we see, well, a lot of money was given to that researcher by this entity that had an invested interest in making sure that that claim came true or came up in that study. So,
interesting.
As we continue to kind of pull back the veil of things, I mean, you can look at it from everything from tobacco to the environment to what's happening. I mean, there are invested interests in every aspect of our society that want people to think one thing or another. Sure. And, being in America and being in this country, it's always been, I mean, it should be that we can think for ourselves and that, we don't live in a world that's where we censor things just because they might be iffy. I think that, why do that? So, I mean, maybe what if Plandemic was categorized as an art piece? How does that change what Plandemic is? So calling something a documentary, sure. I mean, we often think documentaries are these, these truthful stories based on data and facts and all that information. But, it's important for people to do their own research and to go, steps back and see, who is this person? What is the real story here? But for me, when I first saw it, it did bring up a lot of interesting thoughts, and I think that because we haven't been getting the truth from our government and they're still floundering in terms of trying to figure out a solution, that we've been put in a position where we do want information. We're hungry for it. We're hungry for the truth. And maybe that's not, for me, it's not, I don't really care where the coronavirus came from, but how does what's happening between the government and the scientists affect this whole idea of a vaccine, and and who's behind a vaccine? So I think that in some of the articles that I've read about Plandemic, I read those articles talking about the movie, and I say to myself, well, I didn't think that they were saying it that way. I don't think that they made that claim. And so it really does come down to kind of what you hear, what you see, and what you take out of something. and because we're in a free country, you know, everybody has the right to their opinion.
Yeah,
that is true.
this is all very much allegory of the cave driven. Like, you see what's directly in front of you, and you can either choose to perceive that as reality, or you take a step back behind the fire, and then you can see what's puppeting the shadows on the wall. Then you take a step back outside of the cave, things like that. Like, there's so many steps that are involved in everything that's going on, politically driven, anything like that. But yeah, that's a really good point. There's what's going on behind the veil, and then what's going on behind that veil. You know, what's powering that. So
yeah, and I mean, just the one thing, because I know you want to bring in some other people, but you know, the way I found out about Plandemic, my sister, who's 8.5 months pregnant, she sent it to me, and she said, you know, this is making its rounds. It might be taken down. And I mean, this was in the morning when I woke up, and so she sent me this link. I said, "Oh, thanks. I'll watch it later." And then I saw somebody else post it, and somebody else posted. I'm like, "Oh wow, this is a big deal."
Yeah.
And I watched it, and that link was taken down. And then later in the day, I called my sister after watching it, and we had a great discussion about it. And she's a dentist. She has one child already, a 3-year-old baby. And we started talking a little bit about vaccines. And I think before what I want to say is that, you know, we're so quick to put things in these buckets, you know, anti-vaxxers, fake documentary, you know, what is the real truth? What is the real science? And, you know, we don't live in this binary world where there's the right or the wrong or the this or the that, you know, in terms of like scientific method, I mean, one study leads to this study, and, you know, all the failures in scientific pursuit are just as important to the successes. And so in the conversation I had with Chelsea about vaccines, is that she did her own research with her husband, and they went to some seminars, they watched some videos, they learned a lot about vaccines, that, you know, about what to do. And, you know, she said to me over the phone, she said, you know, when a baby is born, it gets automatically a hepatitis vaccine. And hepatitis is something that you either get through sex or through sharing needles. And she said, why would a little baby need a hepatitis vaccine right when it's born? What is the advantage of putting in that into a brand new baby's precious body? And I thought that was an interesting thing to bring up. I never thought of it. I don't have kids. I've never really gone down that road about vaccines myself. I got vaccines as a kid. Our parents got vaccines as a kid. So I don't know. I think that it's definitely a case by case basis.
Did she decide to opt out of getting vaccines for the new baby, or for Peter?
You know, I don't know. I think that maybe they got some vaccines, of course, and then maybe they postponed some to a later time. I mean, I don't think that she's against vaccines.
The question would be like, I mean, everything is different, right? So for a hepatitis vaccine, what is the expiration on that? Are you supposed to get one every 5 years? Are you supposed to get one every 10 years? Or is it one time covers you for life? Because a lot of these things, like, why get a circumcision when you're born instead of waiting till when you're older and you can make that decision for yourself? Like, there's a lot of reasons why some of these things are done, because one, the baby will not remember getting that shot after one day. Like, it's going to be over. And obviously with advances in medical society, they're not going to be sick. And if they are sick from this hepatitis shot, they would probably have the means to treat it if they're administering the shot while they're in the hospital, things like that. But if this is something that covers you for life, then this baby doesn't have to worry about, you know, being 18, getting in an accidental situation where something comes up and they're like, wait, I was never given the shot. Uh-oh. And now it's too late. So, I mean, I'm assuming that a lot of things are driven by that. But I have not done any research on this subject. I just what I
think she was looking at it from the perspective of this brand new baby that just came into the
shiny and new,
at a rapid pace, where, you know, the hormones are firing and all the chemicals, and it's growing, and, like, you know, why introduce something into the body that doesn't need it necessarily at that time? but the biggest thing that I got from Plandemic was actually in regards to the idea of a vaccine and who's behind the vaccine, and who's who would benefit from the creation of a vaccine. And I've had a lot of conversations with people whether I would get a vaccine. Um,
This Josh is exactly why I wanted to have you on the show, because I knew you'd have some smart stuff to say about this. So brilliant. This is exactly where I wanted to start this conversation. Mwah. Beautiful. Excellent.
Sure. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. All right. Yes. So without further ado, I don't want to cut you off there. I just want to open up the discussion a little bit. So just don't go anywhere. Next up is another Corona with Lyme alumni, Lee. Is coming to join us. Lee, hello.
Hi, Lee.
How are you? Can you hear us?
Mike is on mute.
You're unmuted now. Yep, you're good.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's so great to see you. Lee was on our first show. We were on the first one, right?
Yes.
Was I?
Yeah.
I believe it was the very first episode.
Yeah, which was 2 months.
At your house, at your apartment.
Yeah.
Ages ago.
Yeah. So this is 2 months ago, which is just crazy that it's been like that long. And I first of all wanted to check in with you. And the reason when this was all getting started, and this is just sort of a quick detour from our main topic here, but as the virus cases were starting to mount. You are right now in treatment right now for breast cancer.
Yeah.
So you're taking regular trips to the hospital, right, for treatment. And really quick, before we go any further on this, I just wanted you to give us an update on like how that's going, what you've been seeing over the past like 7 or 8 weeks since we last saw you. Like, what's it been like?
Scary at first. As I was going through chemo, I was going to Georgetown every 3 weeks. I think when I was doing my 3rd cycle of chemo, they didn't seem that prepared. They didn't seem that worried. People were just starting to quarantine. The nurses weren't wearing masks. I felt super scared. Then on my 4th cycle, which was 3 weeks later, everything had changed. No visitors, everyone with masks. I went with my N95. They were being very careful. The hospital, at least the area that I went to, completely empty. Just the people being treated were there. And then now I just started radiation, which is happening at another hospital. And they have a clinic kind of off to the side where you do radiation. So I don't actually get in contact with people coming in for COVID, which is great. They're being very careful there. They test you at the front door. They take your temperature. Everyone's wearing masks. And it's really empty. Like, I feel like they're spacing out the patient so that you don't really cross paths.
Right. I mean,
it's scary, but it's not that bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good that, the precautions being taken, everyone's trying to be as safe as possible. Yeah. And how safe can you really be in a hospital, right?
Yeah.
And that's what totally that's scary. But I'm glad that you are okay and that you are looking wonderful and that you have some great energy.
This is the first time you guys see me without hair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you're rocking it. You rock it well.
And it's fair because over the weekend I lost a bet and I had to shave my beard off, which is why I have a mustache now. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah, now I'm lone wolfing this beard situation.
I know it'll come. It comes back. It comes back. But Lee, I wanted to ask you. You've heard about the Plandemic documentary that was floating around last week, right? Did you see it?
Very recently. I have not watched it.
Yeah. But you heard about it.
Yes.
And I was wondering,
kind of like Josh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched it, but I've been reading about what people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I kind of heard in the same way. A friend of mine posted about it, and I was like, "What?" is this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild, and that's what's interesting. The common thread I keep hearing is that people got and I found out about it because a friend of ours
Mm-hmm.
texted it to me, and he's like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "What do you think about what?" Oh my god, what? And I just it was like, and I got it in a text message of all
Yeah.
things, and everybody I've talked to about this has a similar story that it came from somebody that they knew, someone close to them, who was just like, "Have you heard about this?" But it wasn't just from like the usual suspects. It's not like from people who are always, blowing up every conspiracy theory that they hear, they push on social media. It's coming from people who aren't into that, and that's why I think this is so interesting, and has so much is so compelling to so many people on so many different levels. I want to. So we have two other people who are waiting right now, and I want to open up the conversation to everyone here because we want to make this kind of a roundtable situation. So first coming up is Alex. This is his first time on Corona with Live. I love the moon landing. Yes, the moon landing conspiracy. Yes, I love it. Somebody else has a conspiracy theory background. Excellent. Thank you, Alex. And I'm also going to bring in one more Corona with Lime alumni. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Judd Fish coming at you any second now. Howdy.
Peace.
All right.
Peace is also conspiracy.
So
nice.
Now we have the full roundtable. So we've heard from Josh and Lee. Alex, I want to hear from you next. Have you heard about Plandemic, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I heard about Plandemic from you actually the other day. So I read a little bit about it, and obviously you have some choice words for it. But I do think it's a really well made. Lots of money has been put into it for sure, and that's kind of the thing that's troubling the most about it is that I think that lots of people have spent a lot of time and money into something that may have not been verified, may have not been scrutinized correctly, and that's I think one of the issues we have is that. Are things really going through the scientific method, in science anymore? Well, I guess popular science and the media. Every week you'll hear something about like, coffee is great for you today, or the next week you'll hear coffee is horrible for you today. So it's just like all these different things that we consume on a daily basis seem to have facts and figures tied to it, but has it really gone through the scientific method? Which is a very valuable tool that we use, the last couple centuries, and I think it's very important that humans stick to a model that allows for self-critiquing, that allows for people to take information and look at it from both sides and say, well, let's prove it wrong. Let's take what we've learned and then prove it wrong, and if it doesn't hold up, then it's not good. And that's the thing is I think a lot of people aren't watching for that and, aren't taking that into consideration. But moving forward to vaccinations and whether getting to right or wrong and the morality, that's another point. I think it's important to know that vaccines are created by companies, pharmaceutical companies. You have money is always going to be an interest when that comes into play. And I think despite what we say about vaccines being healthy and stuff, there is a risk of pushing vaccines too early. For example, the coronavirus, the CDC, Fauci, all these different high people in high authority about virology and immunology are saying that it could take up to 18 months to get a vaccine, and that's because vaccines have to go through human trials. They have to go through these boards of certification to make sure that they're actually something that should be distributed to the public with minimum risk. Some vaccines do have side effects. For example, the hepatitis B vaccine that Josh was talking about does have some risks attached to it. It's 75 to 95% effective when given on the first day of birth, and that is to prevent the mother to baby transmission when prenatal transmission when the baby is in the womb. You can't get it through feeding, like you said, it's a sexual disease, or through blood transmission through needles. But it is important to remember that why we do the hepatitis B vaccine on the first day of life is because of the scientific method. we've realized that mothers can transmit it to babies, and without that vaccine, it could be something that ravages their liver throughout their entire life chronically. Horrible, horrible disease to have at the end of life. Um, and having that vaccine, your actual chances of contracting hepatitis B drop to like roughly about 1.1%, which is very small compared to, what you could get accidentally through, sex. Teenagers, as Adam were putting out, was mentioned earlier, teenagers aren't always focused on, wearing a condom or, the sexual history of the other person. I mean, I know a lot of us are initially. I mean, it's the honeypot, as you would say. The honeypot could be very enticing.
Alex, you bring up a really good point when it comes to fact checking and trying to understand things. It's hard in certain realms for people to be able to do that on their own. When you're talking about like food or something, what's good about coffee today and what's bad about coffee tomorrow. I don't have a lab here that I can test coffee and find out like everything about coffee and how everything affects my body and stuff like that. So my only resource is to go to the internet and see what I can find about it. And the internet is such a grand stage for anybody from every background.
It's the Wild West.
Yeah, they post whatever information they want. So somebody can make up all the numbers in the world to explain why coffee is so terrible for you based on their own experience or however they put that coffee through trial. And somebody else will be like, oh my gosh, there's so many benefits to coffee based on their experience and what they put through trial. So how does one go through deciphering what's true or not true in a realm like that when there's so much information out there and you don't have the ability to test that on your own?
Absolutely. That is probably the most important point that anyone has to make about when it comes to health is who do you trust and why should you trust them? Obviously with or the Food Drug Administration, all these different entities were created to protect the public because capitalism, as great as it is, also focuses on let's make the most money for the least amount of cost, and health isn't really an important side effect for them because as long as these vaccines can be produced, as long as anaphylactic EpiPens are produced, or like EpiPens jumped in price recently, and that's because a pharmaceutical company determined that they wanted to make more money off of it, not because they cared whether or not people could afford it, and survive. But going back to what you say about validity of the source, and that's really tough. Like you want to be able to trust what you read on the internet, especially from people like maybe people in the government. A lot of people have distrust of the government these days, and maybe that is rightfully so. Maybe it is deserved that the government is criticized for all the things they've done, because if you look at the U.S. history when it comes to destabilizing countries, when it comes to infecting Black African Americans and with infectious diseases in certain communities, like that has all happened. This has all been documented, and the U.S. government has not been the greatest thing when it comes to clarity or the just thing. So when you're on your own and you want to look up things for your own personal use, whether it's something complicated like a medication or if it's something a little bit more commonplace like coffee, it's really important to remember that the scientific method is the best possible route. So if you take into multiple sources and you realize, okay, well, this is saying coffee is great for you and this is saying coffee is bad for you, you have to look at both aspects and you have to look at numbers, because anyone can look at the 1% of a 99% effective drug and say, is it worth getting that 1%? Is it worth getting super sick off that 1% chance that taking this vaccine is bad for you? And science would point to, yes, 99% effective is extraordinarily good and it prevents you from getting this thing, but there is that 1%. So without droning on here, I think it is important to say that doing your own research at a time of there's so much available. You see a drug ad on TV every 15 minutes, like it's a lot to consume, and that's the thing. And you can't really blame people for not knowing, the actual effects of certain things, because there is just so much out there. I mean, on a regular basis, an average person would probably take, a couple of vitamins, maybe some medication for some health things. They eat foods. They probably don't know whether or not they have lactose intolerance. There's a lot of things that go into why a person's gut health or overall health feels a certain way. And it'd be tough to look down on somebody and say, why don't you know about this about yourself? Why don't you know? Like, it would be tough to say that. And I think that in a time of so much like the internet and so much consumption, it's important to remember that you can only be so hard on yourselves, and you should do the best you can. And if you find someone you trust, then go with what they say.
Well, I love that you mentioned the thing about the coffee. I remember years ago, one day on Facebook, I saw like 3 different articles in one day. One was just like, coffee has no effect on your health. Coffee is totally going to kill you in 3 years, and coffee is going to extend your life by 10 years. And I was like, one of you, only one of you can possibly be right. And the point you're making is like, yeah, like science is not an exact science, right? There's no guarantee that it's right. If Neil deGrasse Tyson was here on his show all the time, he's like, one of the most important things in science is to be able to say, I don't know.
Exactly.
Right? It is the admission that ignorance is possible, and that is I think that's a super important part. Judd, I want to get to you. Your thoughts, sir, on Plandemic.
Hi, Judd. How are you?
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Pleasure to be here. So I was one of the people who watched it in its entire 26 minutes. I did share it under the auspicion of, well, here's something different to consider. And I did actually agree with, initially I was putting maybe a 30% of the information presented. Not maybe that I belief is a sketchy word, but I accepted it or I entertained it.
Entertained, yeah, I think that's a good word for it, yeah.
And I also thought, as with any topic, it's so important to get multiple sides of the story. And just because 280 million Americans are doing one thing doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best thing. There was a few topics in there that corroborated other information I had been receiving. So my nephew, who's an 8th grader, has this game where he plays guess the net worth of individuals. And it's usually athletes and celebrities of, performing arts people.
Doctor.
In this case, he asked Dr. Fauci. $20 million, I believe, was the response. Nowhere near what we were, because he had asked Joe Biden before that, which was less than $1 million, and then it was Dr. Fauci.
Wait, did he ask them directly? Like, did the class get them?
The quiz game that he plays at the dinner table is he names the person, and we all try to guess the net worth. Okay. So we had done Biden, which was lower than anticipated, and then Fauci, who we all guessed, around $1 million, and 20 million. So that, I'm very mistrustful of the millionaire and the billionaire class to begin with, because, unless it was, transgenerational wealth, they probably have exploited a large sum of people at some point in order to attain that wealth, unless, they won the lottery or are a performing artist. Another thing that the film Plandemic corroborated was the information I'd received that Fauci had dumped a lot of U.S. dollars into that sketchy Wuhan disease control center that they are saying may have been the origin of this pandemic. So, it just it was connecting with other information I was receiving from other areas of research. Now, I didn't watch the 26 minutes and think that the whole thing's a conspiracy. I didn't become an anti-vaxxer. And I also didn't think that the Trump administration was trying to turn this into a communist nation, which is what, when I shared the video, I was being accused of being an anti-vaxxer. I was being accused of being a conspiracy theorist. I was accused of being way less intelligent than they thought I was before. But, you know, it's like anything, on the internet, it's food for thought. And you can also have a debate about something, publicly or privately, and not always agree. What it led to was a lot of people who I would normally identify as liberals advocating censorship. So I followed up. I took the video. Well, they removed the video, which is a form of censorship, and I'm aware that YouTube is a private entity, and they have, and Facebook also, and they have a right to have any sort of content they so select. But it is it's a dangerous game, Similarly, I was alarmed when Craigslist took down its personal ads because they were afraid that it would be, a way to have prostitution, especially underage prostitution, happening. And then I can't remember the app that used to let everyone share porn. It was really popular, and then they removed all adult content.
I'm unaware of this. Please
Everybody
put the link below.
I'm going to take some careful notes. What were you saying that was?
No, the app. Josh, you know about it. We were talking.
You're talking about Tumblr.
Tumblr, exactly.
Yeah.
So when Tumblr had removed all of its XXX content, again, they're a private entity. They are not the government, and they have a right to share any kind of information or content that they so will. So my second post, after I removed my Plandemic post, which was getting a lot of heat, I think 54 comments, which I wish people would comment like that on my waterfalls. But I said, and now we're advocating censorship. Woo-wee! I think it was 27 comments in the middle of the day with people trying to educate me on what freedom of speech is. Now, I understand that freedom of speech and censorship are related, but I also understand that Facebook, nor YouTube, nor Tumblr, nor Craigslist are government entities yet. But this idea that people the individuals were advocating for censorship was the thing that I was discomforted me, right? And instead, I'm back with being labeled an anti-vaxxer, etc. So I felt a little bit like, this really is 1984, where anybody that deviates from the groupthink is villainized as an anti-vaxxer and somebody that wants people to die of this disease, someone that doesn't believe this, I think it's a hoax, and now I must think everything's a hoax because I am questioning I'm questioning Dr. Fauci's involvement with the Wuhan clinic. I'm questioning where his $20 million net worth came from as a scientist. I'm questioning whether or not they could provide a cure, a vaccination, or treatments before they found out a way to profit off of it. Another concern I have about Dr. Fauci and Dr. Briggs is they were introduced to the nation as the people who have been fighting AIDS. Newsflash, they failed. It's not cured. 30 million plus dead from it, people still dying from it. We do have a drug that I'm sure is making people like Dr. Fauci and others very rich, but I don't know if anyone knows about this PrEP drug. Most insurance don't cover it. It's $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month to keep us from getting AIDS, or if you have AIDS, from transmitting it. And this is, so again, now they do know in terms of AIDS that if done correctly, a bone marrow transplant from one of the people who are who have a kind of a resistance to the disease to somebody suffering from the disease can be effective. Why is that treatment not being invested in and being highlighted? Instead, this PrEP drug that charges every sexually active gay man who is not in a monogamous relationship $1,000 a month, unless they for some miracle have insurance that would cover it, and then also to sex workers and some, of course, other at-risk populations that want to get on that. So again, why are we trusting people who failed at their last project? That is alarming. Another thing about Dr. Fauci that was produced in the video that I found interesting was that, the patents thing is also very interesting. I mean, when we got the polio vaccine, that guy donated he didn't accept any money for it. He wanted to make sure everyone got the polio vaccine for free, which may or may not have led to other problems. But the patents are something that I think is worth questioning. Um, let's see. I think that was my rant about Dr. Fauci. Another claim made in the video was about whether the quarantine affects overall, and that if we were making ourselves more vulnerable in the long run by continuing to quarantine from one another. And I do think that the exchange of germs amongst human beings is the reason why our immune systems are as strong as they are. But at the same time, I'm not advocating for us to individually break the quarantine or as a nation to give up on it. I do also find it interesting that the majority of the infections are coming from a home exposure, and the highest death rates are in the nursing homes, and infection rates are highest in jails, which consequently are also places where people can't leave. So,
but if one person introduces it to a place where people can't leave, then it makes sense that it would be amongst everybody.
Well, I did see, of course, and I saw a news story. I'm not saying it's just growing in our houses, but or in our jails or our nursing homes. I mean, it just coming out of the sink like like Pennywise. But so if we're all staying home all day, but then we're getting Instacart or McDonald's delivered, God forbid, we're really not. That's not really a quarantine at all, actually. I mean, a full-on quarantine, what would be like China did, where you cannot leave your house, you cannot get anything delivered, like you cannot sing out your window. Like, I mean, we've got like the pussyfoot version of the quarantine.
Well, I think that's because of who we are as a society. And I've talked about this before. Like, our society is founded on people who try to leave people who would dictate what they would do, right? England mandates that you do this. No, screw that. I'm going to go form my own country. Fuck you. I'm out. And then they take their boats over here, and then England's like, no, but you're from us. You're one of us. It's like, nope, we're going to war now. You suck it. You get away from us. We're our own people. And this is why we've grown. We've been stubborn. Our entire society is based around being so stubborn. So when people try to make any kind of mandates, screw you, no, you're taking away my rights. I don't want to have to stay inside and then cough in somebody else's face because it's my fucking right to cough in somebody else's face. Well, that's why we can't get anything done. These other countries are like, hey, you go over there, stay far away. You guys stay in your home. We have 2 weeks. Ready? Go. Everyone's like, okay, cool. They do it. It's done. Boom. It's over. We don't do that here. People don't give a shit. People don't care about the next person like to the left of them. Like we're all stubborn. Everybody doesn't want to do it. Oh, I've been home. I can't get my hair cut. Right. We understand. Like, yes, it sucks. But there are worse things like, I don't know, killing everybody else around you by spreading any kind of disease. Now, I agree with you about like herd immunity and stuff like that. Like, I don't get sick very often, and it's for whatever, I'm usually dealing with other people. I'm usually around other people. Like, I don't know. I keep clean, but I think like just being exposed to other people constantly, like they say that people who have been biting their nails, and I don't do this, but people who have been biting their nails since they were kids have stronger immune systems because you've been ingesting germs and stuff that you're getting from the nails. Like that is a thing that I have heard. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. I'm no scientist, but like I don't know. There's so much stuff going on when it's around this. Herd immunity has its benefits, but when it comes to this many people, it's hard to see it from the other side. Like, it would be so awesome if I could put a pause on everything that's going on here and going back a couple months and taking away everything we did, even though I still feel like we did it too late, but taking away everything we did in terms of quarantining and stuff like that and seeing where we would be at this point and recording that. I could be totally wrong. Like, maybe with herd immunity, we would have banished this thing within 3 weeks instead of being on 2 months of lockdown. But the chances of that are really low. And there's a lot of scientists that would corroborate what I'm saying. Like the fact that we have gone into quarantine is what allowed the numbers to drop so low. And when I'm looking at a lot of these issues when it comes to like global warming and climate control, and when I look at like this and quarantine, it's like so many people are arguing for the other side. It's like, but when you look at the alternatives, like most likely like what one side of the argument is trying to say is like, yo, let's get into quarantine, we can reduce some of the spread, and the other side is saying otherwise. It's like, what we're trying to do is stop death. We're not trying to harm people. Like it's not gonna, and if you go the other direction, who knows how many more people could have died. I guess we won't understand it. In terms of like climate control, like let's say an organization wants to switch from using fossil fuels to using solar panels, right? Like, yeah, the people who are advocating for that aren't because they want to throw a wrench in anyone's plans. Like they legitimately think that it might save the earth. And let's say we're wrong. Yeah, we screwed up a couple infrastructures, maybe some people's jobs got rearranged, but the alternative, let's say we were right and we chose not to do anything, then people die. And we hit the end of the world. I'm sorry, guys. Like, oh, my bad. We were wrong. Like, you can't come back from that. You can come back from making a mistake about switching an infrastructure. You can say, oops, I guess we were wrong. Climate will go back to normal. No big deal. But the people who are doing it aren't doing it like they're doing it to try to better other people. When we're talking about quarantine, I feel like it's very similar. They're trying to make the quarantine to make things better for people. And a lot of people refuse to accept that as a possibility. They think they're trying to be controlled. No, what benefit do they get? Like, I'm sitting here. I have privilege. Keep in mind, I think we argued about this last time, Judd. I still have not gotten paid. I have gotten zero money from Maryland State. So I've been here for almost 2 months with no money. My bank account's in negative, and I'm going to talk about my bank on another episode. Oh, believe you me, we're going to talk about my bank on another episode.
Wait.
I'm in a bad situation, but at the same time, like, I still have a roof over my head. They're not shutting off power. They're not evicting anybody. Like, there are worse things that could be happening. I don't have any money, and I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. Sucks.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, your first point, Americans, yes, we are not just stubborn, we're rebellious.
Yes.
In terms rebellious, right? Which, can be a good thing and a bad thing, double-edged sword. Herd immunity. So Angela Merkel, who's a biochemist and the leader of Germany, said at some point or another, at least 75 or 70% or more of the population will be infected with this disease at some form, even though Germany has done quite a good job. They tend to be a very compliant, rule-following culture. I was raised there and experienced that. But she still said, even with the quarantine, 70% plus infection rate of some form. Now, the quarantine, in my understanding, was not actually to keep people from getting the disease. It was to keep people from all getting the disease at the same time and overwhelming our healthcare system.
Flatten the curve.
Right. Well,
I don't agree with it. I think there are multiple reasons why quarantine. It was so people don't get it all at the same time, but it was also so people wouldn't get it. Or if you had it, you're not giving it to other people unknowingly.
The original plan was to flatten the curve. And that flatten the curve phrase that was thrown around by the CDC meant you are all going to get it eventually. Most people will get it eventually. As many as 80% of people will get it. There is no avoiding that.
Yeah,
but if everyone gets sick at once, that would destroy the healthcare system, and a lot of people would die.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and they're saying this will probably come back for the next 3 years. So I think exactly, like, almost everybody will get it in some form, and then the whole purpose of the quarantine was to just slow it down from overwhelming the healthcare system, and then more people would die that perhaps wouldn't have died because the healthcare system would been more capable of handling it. But in terms of the perchance negative side of the quarantine, which I do understand worked well in a lot of European countries, and Sweden has decided to do something different. They've seen a surge of death, but also if they're saying this is going to come back next year around this time, it's going to come back in the following year, we would have to look at that those numbers in the context of 2 or 3 years, like much like the Spanish flu. Now, one of the things that my concerns about the quarantine is that 40% of people with coronavirus are asymptomatic. Now, what if they all have the germs, the other viruses, the bacterium, the whatever? They're carrying the germs that keep people from being symptomatic, and we're not sharing them with each other. I mean, I'm not saying that's a fact. Again, I don't even know how well I did in biology in school, but it's just food for thought, which I think is something that was being implied in the Plandemic video. But could I just, a lot of the people attacking me about the Plandemic thing on last Friday and on Facebook had never watched it. Has everyone here watched it?
Yeah, I watched the majority of it.
The majority of it.
Yeah.
Josh, did you watch it yet?
Yeah, I watched it.
And
Alex.
I heard about it just like a few
Okay.
hours ago.
Yeah. So, Adam, like what? How far did you get into it? You didn't get to the last couple minutes of it, because that to me tended to be the most compelling part.
I'd say I watched about 90%, but I didn't watch the last couple minutes of it. No.
Okay. Yeah. Well.
Explain to me what was compelling about it.
What was the end of it?
Yeah, talk to me, Judd. Talk to me.
Just basically the kind of the final premise of the beginning of what was to be a larger thing is that it's implying that this will not be resolved until the billionaire and millionaire class find a way to make them have this disease make them richer than they already are. And as if you look at, there was a recent article about how the country's richest men have gotten even richer during this time. Bill Gates, Bezos, and of course some others. It is profitable for the 0.1% us to live like this, because in terms of our economy, now we've cut out a lot of middlemen. We've shut down the mom and pop shop on the corner where you may have gone to get a few items, and now we all are going through to Amazon or to the big box stores.
Most of which will cease to exist forever as a result of this. Yeah.
Yes. So now we've cut out the human component. Now it's going to be consumers direct to giant corporations. So people in North Carolina are saying, well, Walmart is packed. Why can't they reopen the specialty stores? I mean, and I don't go to Walmart, but so it doesn't surprise me that Forbes magazine, for example, was one of the first to come out with an article attacking the film Plandemic, because it's definitely in their interest to have a single voice so that we continue to stay in our homes and order from the major corporations solely.
Well, I got a couple things on that. Where is it mandated that small mom and pop restaurants in retail can't be open? Because almost all the restaurants in my area are open, even the small ones for takeout and delivery. You can't go and dine in, but you can get your food to go instead of in all the grocery stores. So, I mean, going to Walmart, the only other thing would be clothing, but you don't really buy that from mom and pop clothing stores, at least not in this area. There aren't any. So I can't really speak to that. And as far as the other point, I didn't realize that was a conspiracy theory. If so, then I guess I'd be a conspiracy theorist. I thought it was pretty well known that rich people usually profit from things like this when there's anything medically involved. I thought it was well known that Donald Trump, was touting hydroxychloroquine, and that was a company that produces it was Novartis, or I think it was Novartis.
Yeah.
And that is one of he holds shares with that company. I thought that was known that people are profiting from this. I didn't think that was a conspiracy theory.
There was one.
If that were they were talking, the only thing that I was gathering from Plandemic that we were going at is that this person is trying to post that Fauci is attacking her and blah blah blah, and then I saw that she was debunked on a lot of her theories that she was trying to do. And to be completely honest, there's a lot of shit going on. I haven't been paid in 2 months. I could give two shits about this lady and what she's saying. I mean, I will wait to see what happens, if the country develops a vaccine. Otherwise, I'm just going to stay in quarantine. I watch these videos because I like perspective. I like opinion. I don't know if you remember the movie Zeitgeist a long time ago. I don't believe necessarily everything they talk about in Zeitgeist, but I find it interesting to see how other people think. And I like the points that they make because they entertain me. It makes me giggle, right? And that's what's ultimately most important. So as far as what you're saying, like I actually believe a lot of that stuff. Like I feel like a lot of wealthy people like to stay in power, and that's what a lot of the organizations try to do for themselves. They try to cover their assets.
Well, I mean, what is most concerning about what's going on with Plandemic is that so many people who consider themselves liberals included are advocating censorship. And again, I'm not talking about whether or not Facebook or YouTube have to provide a platform for this, but the individuals are advocating for censorship in a way that we haven't seen since like the anti-porn movement in the 70s.
Whoa.
So that is concerning, and they want to silence other people who are speaking out on social media, regardless of whether or not they're sharing the video or articles by those.
The reason for that is to prevent false information from getting into the public and causing more deaths. It has nothing to do with censorship, because what they're saying is protected against the First Amendment. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's why you can't recommend drugs that are going to kill people, like hydroxychloroquine.
Well, which claim in Plandemic are you saying would put people in danger of spreading the disease? I mean, other than the mask thing, which wasn't even related to the gal that worked for Dr. Fauci, but which claim in the movie are you saying would put people in danger of infecting others?
Well, there are a couple of claims in the movie that are definitely untrue.
Well, which are dangerous, though? If you're saying that they're dangerous, he's saying the First Amendment.
I think it's the seed that's dangerous. If you plant the seed that the institution that's supposed to be supplying you with this information is incorrect, similar to a person that you might know saying that the media is all fake. Like anytime you start planting that seed in people that the media is fake, and people stop trusting the media and stuff that gets out, like that in itself is a dangerous entity. Now, like I said, I didn't watch this whole movie, but I'm assuming Alex is going with the fact that if you plant that seed in people that everything else that is coming out informationally is untrue, how is that unsimilar to what Donald Trump is doing when he says the media is fake?
Well, I mean, I guess perhaps it's not different, but basically, again, we're all advocating for censorship, and not one of you has given me a reason why any of the claims made in the film were dangerous, other than it could plant the seed.
Because the person that made it has been incorrect in her research.
In which the research study about chronic fatigue.
The what?
The chronic fatigue article that she retracted. I mean,
she didn't retract it.
But the chronic fatigue article led to one of the first claims that vaccines cause autism. Because she claimed that vaccines caused it, and oh, by the way, also autism and Alzheimer's.
Yeah, well, she doesn't claim to be an anti-vaxxer in the movie, and she denies the allegation. But again, I'm saying, you guys keep saying, oh, she's not credible, etc. But you're advocating for censorship because it's dangerous, and the only thing you're saying is dangerous is planting the seed in someone's mind. So are we burning books yet?
Just to be clear, I don't think that the film should be censored at all. I think it should be left up because the filmmakers who made it absolutely have the right to say so. Josh mentioned stuff about that. Alex, Lee mentioned that. Yeah. There is absolutely cause for freedom of speech, and you should be able to make whatever you want and post it on the internet. This show is a monument to that freedom of speech, right? But at the same time, I think it is also fair to point out that there are some things that get said in that documentary that are just very wrong. One of the
fact that flu vaccines
they're more
increase
wrong than things that Donald Trump has said. I
don't think so either.
Yeah, and I think the things that are
bad standard to be compared to.
I do have to agree with Judd, because I do not think that they're inherently dangerous. I mean, whether it becomes about somebody's reputation and what they said and what they're trying to do. I mean, for me, if we just kind of look at this, what came up for me is, okay, so there was an opportunity for Fauci to go in front of a congressional hearing recently, and the White House pulled him out of that and told him that there was no reason for him to do that. I mean, that is also another form of censorship, because it's like, what are they most concerned about? The questions that Fauci will get, the answers that he will give, the potential that he will lie and not be truthful. I mean, it adds to this brew of kind of this toxic brew that we're experiencing in our society, where it's this, from every angle, the person just doesn't know what the hell to believe.
Who to trust? Who can you trust?
Or who to trust or what to do. I think we do have an opportunity here to ask, is it Ellie or Alessandra?
It's Lee. Probably Lee.
Lee.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's been a lot of documentaries. There's been a lot of information about the business of cancer and cancer treatments. I'm sure if you could maybe share some of your experience and some of the research that you've done about the business of cancer, maybe that can help maybe illuminate kind of how we're all kind of trying to navigate this whole idea of the business of the coronavirus and maybe, certain people and agencies who might want to keep some information, under wraps.
Yep.
To be honest, I never thought I would be someone who would get cancer. I always thought I took enough care of myself and, kept track of how my body was, that I wouldn't be in this position. But I remember thinking things like, oh, if this ever happens to me, maybe I'll just stop eating sugar, because you read that stuff on the internet. Maybe I'll stop drinking coffee, whatever. And then you're faced with a diagnosis and you have to trust someone. You have to. And am I not going to trust my doctors? Am I not going to trust that if they're telling me go and do chemo because that's going to reduce your chances of getting a recurrence by 90%, because someone on the internet, some fitness Instagrammer, is saying that if you stop eating sugar, you'll be saved? I had to trust my doctors in the end. Going on the internet, for me, actually finding out cancer, and it changed the way that I do research. I stopped trusting a lot of these unfounded studies. There's a lot that you can read about how you can stop cancer on its tracks by drinking turmeric every day. But I can't. I need to trust modern science at this point. I have to.
If I can connect, Josh, what you were saying, Joe, what you were saying, and Lee, what you were just saying, I think the villain here, it's disguised. And I think that the insidious nature of this particular documentary is that it posits this idea that there's this like power brokering that's going on behind closed doors. That's what's causing all this. I think the explanation is a lot simpler, and I think the explanation is capitalism. It all comes back to money, and there is absolutely a great argument to be made there, especially in any cursory amount of research into cancer treatment or into AIDS treatment or anything like that. By the way, one of the things that is mentioned in that documentary that gets glossed over in every one of the articles, in your defense, Josh and Judd, is that one of the things that gets said early on, remember, is that line about how Fauci owns patents to AIDS drugs personally, right? That he was able to acquire through the Bayh-Dole Act. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
I thought they were talking about how universities have patents.
Right.
He put his name on them.
Right. So the Bayh-Dole law, which is a real thing, and gives government agencies the ability to appropriate patents from university researchers that accept federal money. So all of the federal dollars that were spent on AIDS research and other things, there is a loophole in that law that says that CDC officials can personally take those patents for themselves and complete the research and get the credit, which is something that is actually true. Anthony Fauci does own several AIDS drug patents, and I went and you can find them on public patent records.
But what you said about how, like, there's this disguised attempt to, you said what's
I think he said insidious.
About the documentary is that it talks about this kind of complex, where people are making money. It's like, we have so many examples of that, though, that go back historically. And it's like, I think why shouldn't we be so quick to say, hey, here's another example of invested interest trying to manipulate us when we have historical. If you go back and you see that, okay, this happened here, this happened here, this happened here, is a pattern of misinformation and lies. And, so when these things are brought up in the documentary, it's not so far-fetched to say, that could be true.
That's exactly
and I
right.
don't think that,
That's exactly
but I
right.
don't.
And that's why I use the word insidious, because it's not that far-fetched, but a lot of the details that they mention in it are factually untrue. For example, we know for sure that the coronavirus was not created in a laboratory. There is a 0% chance that is true.
Disagree.
0%.
I have to disagree too.
Yeah, why do you think it's a 0% chance?
Because
keep in mind, I wasn't there.
Because every scientific journal has all agreed that the coronavirus did start in an animal species and then evolved, and that's how humans got it.
Godwin,
Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Do research.
Yeah. You'd have to read so many scientific journals to make that claim. I think what I like about what Josh is saying, and tie it back to your intro of who do you trust, is that maybe we've, for a long time, our entire lifetime, at least since the 80s, we've been trusting a for-profit science medical system that is for profit. And it's not for the good of mankind.
But when you're faced with
totally agree with there.
But when you're faced with death, with AIDS, cancer, COVID, whatever, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna hope that your body fights it itself? And
that's the problem with the institution, because it's for profit, it gives you no choice, right? So let's say they are going to make money off of you, Lee, for your treatments for the rest of your life. I think we all know that they are. It's a guarantee. It's but you're right. You as a person don't have another choice. You have to go through that. You have to become indebted, because that's the way that our society runs. We are a for-profit, credit and debt society. So it breaks my heart. And it breaks my heart that you had to have that internal conversation where you're like, who do I trust? How do I trust my doctor? You hope that this person who took a Hippocratic oath to protect other people, you hope that this person actually cares about you and is looking out for your best interests.
And hasn't been gotten to by the pharmaceutical industry.
But everything is about money, and everything is for profit. And the medical system here is very much about profit.
Can I jump in really quick?
No, I'm just going to go for it.
Go ahead, John.
The documentary does bring up and introduces several doctors who did speak out because they felt it was an obligation for them to have a counterpoint to what we're hearing through the mainstream media. And I think what's interesting about these doctors, in the same way that you're talking about this, is that
they're chimpanzees.
Some of these doctors who are real doctors are called, they're practicing malpractice, and they're not a real doctor for saying these things. We're so quick to say that these people who are speaking out and saying, okay, well, here's a situation where Medicare and Medicaid, is giving money for the classification of COVID-19. Here's a situation where we don't have the right protective equipment that we need, and so I do believe that doctors, actually really do care about people. And
for sure,
they know how to do the treatments, but it's also, we can't, unless we hear like a million voices,
right,
or
four can't speak out.
A few that are brought up in a documentary. A documentary usually presents, like a few, and then what do you do with those? I mean, so in terms of the things that the documentary brings up, I actually find it interesting to think about. If us staying at home, is that lowering our immune systems? We go out every day and we interact with different types of bacteria. And now staying at home, we don't do that. I mean,
first of all,
we've been out interacting with this bacteria forever, and if that were the case, then we would have already been immune to it before we even got sick. So
I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about just on a general basis.
I'm talking about on a
bacteria.
general basis. Like if everyone got that herd immunity from the get-go, people would just not get sick. There are things that affect people. There are things that are different. So being out in the public, I don't think would be the answer to curing this, because we wouldn't have had the problem in the first place.
I was just talking about our immunity. And,
in general, in general. Yeah, I think
general,
also,
our immunity is based on the interaction with bacteria throughout the day, other people's bacteria, and that just is how you form a general sense of immunity in your body. And
right. It's why those people that have been on islands for generations are so vulnerable to diseases. And then also, Adam, diseases viruses and bacterium do mutate over time in response to us developing more and more immunities. But I want to go back to what Josh said about the hospitals over-diagnosing or
medicating?
Not over-medicating, of inflating the amount of actual COVID deaths. That the person could have died of another actual cause, but they were tested with COVID, or they had potentially even been exposed to it, that they are counted as a COVID death. And I think what's really significant to think about, and this actually relates to what Lee was saying about sugar, is that obesity causes 300,000 deaths a year, right? 300,000 deaths a year. We're not even a third of there with this presupposed COVID deaths yet. So, and that's annually and not just a one-time spike. If we looked at every obese person that died and ignored all the other comorbidities, and we just counted them as obesity deaths, imagine what that number would be. And I feel like that's kind of what we're doing with these COVID diagnoses, that now we're saying that pretty much any issue you had, it was, and you showed a positive for COVID,
then they would label it COVID. Exactly. because that gets grants. It's about money, as what Chris was talking about.
Yeah.
And
it all comes back to money.
I've talked to doctors, and I'm not going to name any names, but they were talking about, like, they are told in situations that they have to list somebody as a COVID death if they want to be able to completely pay the rest of their staff, if they want to get those grants, if they want to get that money. And to make sure that we're completely clear, I talked about coming into the show as a holistic view, seeing things from every side. So I'm not taking any one side or the other. And actually, to your point, Judd, I find it very interesting how much effort there has been put out to censor this, as opposed to other videos in the past. Zeitgeist, you could always find it whenever you wanted to go on the internet. If they wanted to censor that movie, they could have removed it if there was anything that hit any nerves or hot buttons. So the fact
that movie was over the top, though, and it
doesn't matter. I mean, it was talking about 9/11.
Okay.
They were talking about 9/11 and how our administration set up 9/11. Like, that's some pretty hardcore stuff, and the government didn't remove it. If people are removing things like this and going out of their way to make sure that every time it resurfaces or pops up and they're going to remove it, I mean, that's a red flag for sure. I don't know the validity behind it. I don't know the actuality behind it, but it does trigger a red flag. Alex, I know you wanted to chime in. You had a point you wanted to make.
Well, there's a lot to unpack. It's been a while since I've spoken. I'll try to hit them all. But first of all, there's been no evidence so far that says that once you've got COVID, you won't get it again. In fact, it's the opposite. Once you get COVID, especially when you're a health worker, you seem to get it more often. So it's actually not so much about herd immunity, because if you get COVID once, doesn't mean you're going to be immune from it. That's just what's been shown so far. I mean, me and Adam have both spoken to a doctor, that is actually on the front lines of this in New York City, and he said that he's probably gotten COVID 3 or 4 times by now, because he's working 14 days on, 2 days off, and he's surrounded by these people all the time without correct protection gear. He's also saying that he's pronouncing people who are in their 20s dead. So it's not like it's just affecting the elderly population. It's affecting a lot of people. And also to the point of quarantine, the Spanish flu, which actually is very similar to the coronavirus in terms of the R naught, which is the infectious rate of how often one person gets infected and it's going to infect other people. They're very similar, and also the death rate about 2%. The Spanish flu killed 4 times as many people in the second wave than it did the first, and that's because people left the homes, they left the quarantine, they left everything.
We won World War One, so everyone went out and partied to celebrate.
Yeah.
And that's what killed a
Also,
bunch
the
of people,
third
yeah.
wave killed about roughly twice as many times as the first wave too. So the thing is, we're going to get more waves of COVID. I do think everyone at some point, or at least up to 80%, is going to eventually get COVID, and it was used to stagger the amount of people in the hospital, and that's because there just aren't enough beds. Like a hospital is only so big. There are only so many ventilators out there, and reliably, you can only split a ventilator 4 ways at maximum, and that's if everyone has roughly the same O2 and respiratory rates as the other person. It's just a matter of numbers. But I think to say that because the quarantine is working and there aren't that many deaths, like to say obesity has killed 300,000 people or way more, as it probably has, and saying that COVID hasn't reached the numbers is an injustice. You're saying that COVID doesn't matter because it hasn't killed that many people. It hasn't killed that many people because we've done an extraordinary effort to make sure it hasn't.
Hey, Judd, when you said
Judd, you're on mute.
You're on mute, which is great. So it allows me the chance to chime in. So, Judd,
Which is great.
Hold on.
Stay that way.
I
Anyways, we were saying.
listed that number next to the number of COVID was for a base of comparison, because the point was it's 300,000 annually, and not when an overweight person goes to the hospital and or passes away, we don't count every single death of an obese person as an obesity death, like as a direct correlation. So that was the point, is that I know financially it's useful for them to have more COVID deaths at their hospital, more COVID patients. But in terms of us looking at that number and becoming fearful, which when Americans become fearful, it usually is very bad.
Judd, in your statistics that you were talking about, when you say obesity deaths, are you referring to deaths from obesity or deaths related to complications from being obese? So are you talking about somebody who is obese, who is more susceptible to other illnesses that have killed them because they were obese and that allowed them to be killed by that? Or is this just from being overweight?
Well, so this statistic was pulled from an article about how McDonald's and Coca-Cola kill more Americans than COVID.
Was it written by Donald Trump?
No, he loves McDonald's and Coca-Cola.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
He's on the side of let's eat ourselves to death.
Yeah.
They've also seen a correlation between high morbidity with COVID and obese patients. So that's cause for concern. But no, that number was just the people dying directly from obesity-related illnesses. So that would be like diabetes, heart disease.
So diabetes is its own problem because obviously you can have that without being obese. Obesity does obviously trigger diabetes. So these are things related to obesity that has triggered other things, and these are deaths that have occurred in other ways. I'm a big dude, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that try to classify obesity as being a disease, like it affects some people in certain ways. And there's a lot of people out there that don't believe that obesity is a disease. So I know that there's a lot of funding and stuff that is not sent towards understanding why some people are compelled to eat certain ways or how they have reactions to food and certain addictions like a drug. So, I mean, I feel like it's actually obesity is probably in the same case. We handle obesity the same way that we handle a lot of our other really big, serious problems. Some people just don't care. And when some people don't care, it leads to more deaths and it leads to problems. And I think it's actually very similar to COVID in the fact that it claims lives through other means. Like a lot of people aren't dying to COVID. People are dying to complications that came about because they had COVID, things like that. Go ahead.
I think the relevant part, though, is that it is about funding. And it's like, Fauci being the head of an organization that allocates millions and millions of dollars to 4 different organizations, that deal with science and medicines. We have to be aware of that, that a choice was made to give this laboratory or this corporation money, taxpayer money, I guess you would even.
Well, we
right?
kind of had to because they were all fired ahead of time. Maybe if we had our full CDC team and our infectious disease specialists that still work for us, we wouldn't have to throw millions of taxpayer dollars into funding. But I mean, that's just me. Like I said, I'm no scientist. I'm no politician. I just work at a restaurant.
Yeah, but I mean, it's our taxpayer money, and like the documentary pointed out, or maybe it was an article after that millions of dollars did go to that Wuhan lab for coronavirus testings, and I mean, $3.2 million or whatever it was is a drop in the bucket in terms of overall expenses, and but. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we're just trying to figure out, how we can prevent ourselves from getting sick and what the future looks like for all of us, and if the future involves a vaccine, I don't think the documentary was anti-vax. I saw a lot of articles that categorized it that way, but I don't think it's dangerous to say, when this vaccine comes out, do your research and find out who's responsible for it, who's making money off of the vaccine, and the
insidious veil in the back.
The U.S. government is calling this operation to find a vaccine. I think, what is it called, like Operation Warp Speed or something, so that we can do this super fast. Did you guys hear that?
No.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Operation Warp Speed is the operation to find a vaccine as quickly as we can. The documentary did bring up the fact that, she mentioned something about, we really don't have the proper vaccines the way we need to, but I can't reference it right now because I don't have the specifics of it. But the flu vaccine, it does change every year, and I think that it even changes throughout the year. Yeah. So when we're thinking of it like we're waiting for the vaccine, like, no, it's not just going to be one vaccine. It's going to require millions and millions of more dollars on an ongoing basis to understand how the virus, evolves, and it could be even
already.
Yeah, isn't there like 27 strands of this virus?
Yes, but the RNA sequence of the same virus is the same throughout all of them. So that's what they're targeting, is the RNA sequencing.
And that's what I think she brought up in the video, is that a vaccine based on an RNA sequence. Do you remember? Did you watch it, Alex?
I only watched a little bit of it because I had to jump on here real quick.
I can't remember, but she said that the idea of a vaccine doesn't quite link to RNA the way we think it does. Again, I can't speak to it.
Yeah, but I don't think taking her word for that is the appropriate thing. I mean, Dr. Oz is also a real MD, but he also said that you wouldn't get the COVID, or you wouldn't get COVID if you could hold your breath for like 10 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, he was, oh my gosh, adamantly proposing hydrochloroquine. I was watching and he was on TV and I was passing by, and he's like, well, of course we know that it works. Why don't we get that out as soon as possible? Why don't we get that out to everyone? I was like, who are you? Like, you're
right. And that's more dangerous in my mind than a documentary like this, because what the documentary did bring up was that the patients who rely on hydrochloroquine for treatment of, it's not acid reflux. What am I thinking of?
Malaria.
Malaria?
And lupus.
Lupus is the main thing.
Yeah, people who have lupus don't have access to the drug. And
I know they were going to get real bad.
Yeah, it was real bad, actually.
Real thing, though. Like, that's
real bad.
She name checks it in the documentary.
Hoax. Yeah. And I think if people go back to that documentary and watch it again, I actually think the majority of the things that are brought up and discussed in that film, are not malicious. I think that there are things that people should be talking about and considering.
Sure. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with considering a different point of view.
Yeah, I don't believe in censorship. So
I think it's just dangerous to say, like, I think she said something in there about like, how the beach has these healing microorganisms
Oh yeah.
or something like that, and that's just utterly false. Like that's why we close beaches, because there's these healing microbes and people can't get them, and that's why we close them. Like that's just utterly false. And
I don't know that she actually made. She said she was saying there are in all of nature there are microbes that are healthy for us. I believe that.
I'll send you the quote.
Yeah. Well,
that
but
was the part about developing immunity.
Yeah,
I'm gonna DM you. I got the quote.
Yeah, that would surprise me that anybody would walk around not thinking that the ocean and the forest and all these sorts of places were actually good for our health and immune systems.
No, but not that. That's not what she said. She said that we closed beaches because they have these healing organisms, and the government doesn't want people to get them.
Now,
that's a much different statement than saying that.
She makes a lot of claims in the documentary about how the government is like doing the COVID-19 thing is sort of a deliberate
because
thing.
You can't get grounded. You can't step out in the forest and bring in all of your healing juices. That's I mean, I don't know.
It would require thousands of people to keep a very tight secret, and I don't know if I am ready to buy into that. What do you guys think?
Well, where do we find the cures to diseases except for in nature? What the stuff that they make in the labs is made from naturally occurring chemicals for the most part, or combined with one another. So, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's very 1984 of us all to be like, she was wrong about chronic fatigue in mice. So she's not we need to lock her up. Then this is what I hear a lot of liberals turning into. Like put her in jail and discredit any sort of scientific opinion she has, even though she worked for the National Institute of Health for like 30 some odd years, and she published one thing about.
She didn't just publish one thing. She said that there was a drug that cured autism.
No, she did not.
She did say that. I will literally give you the quote. She's
you can find the quote. I watched the documentary, the entire thing.
Not in the documentary. I'm talking about in her personal life.
She also got hired by a billionaire couple hired her to run a research lab to study CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. And of course, she has a background in infectious diseases. So her conclusions were that, this must be caused by a virus. It must have been caused by this particular virus. And by the way, autism was related to that. And she was a lot of, and of course that was all thrown out. She was eventually fired. And then as a result, she kind of made all this noise like, I've been had, everybody ganged up on me. And while, who knows what really happened, the evidence that exists now suggests that that's not the case.
So the topic of this is Plandemic. I'm talking about what you said in Plandemic, which is that she developed a treatment when she worked for Dr. Fauci for autism, and that because Fauci couldn't find a way to profit off of it, he shelved it. And this is a treatment that could have helped improve the quality of life for autistic people. Not that it was a cure. I didn't hear any of this stuff about being caused by vaccines in the documentary that tonight's show is supposed to be about. So,
well, yeah, and I think that there is definitely there is demonstrable proof that Dr. Fauci has profited off of other people's research into different drugs, specifically with AIDS, is the ones that I found, not autism, but. There's a claim about that when he was researching AIDS drugs,
he didn't make any money
appropriated, and that's where a lot of his money came from, where he sold AIDS drugs to
not curing AIDS, but treating it poorly,
treating
it badly. How many people did they shove full of expensive AZT, which now we find out did almost nothing? For 20 years, AIDS people were desperate, selling their bodies to get money to get AZT, and it did not help. And now they're trying to plug us in on this PrEP drug. Oh my goodness!
Right, and the common thread is money. This all comes back to money, and capitalism seems like it can seem like I guess here's my overall thing is because the free market can seem like a conspiracy because in many ways it is, but it's also not a hidden one. It's also like right out there in public.
I gotta take my COVID treatment.
If you guys want to talk about a real conspiracy theory. Let's talk about the fact that Magic Johnson was told that he can't play basketball because he has HIV, and yet this guy is still kicking it. Like this, did somebody lie to him? Like, was it a big practical joke that they played on him just so he wouldn't compete? Because he was never taken down by AIDS. I'm thinking that is either he's got the antibodies or this was a big conspiracy against Magic Johnson winning like 10 more titles.
Good point.
I just wanted to point out earlier that like Plandemic, the movie, was uploaded to YouTube and didn't charge us for it. They didn't say if you want to watch our maybe they're making some money off of it, like, through the YouTube system and ad sales, but what's their motive? Except for just getting out their point of view and their perspective and how they see it.
I believe
I agree with you. I don't think it should be censored.
I think the motive.
It's not like we're being told that we have to buy into it and watch it. I mean, it's free speech.
Well, I think the motive behind it, the other side of that, like the thing that people were arguing was that it was supposed to put her in the limelight because she's trying to sell a new book. So it was supposed to popularize this doctor to give her fame. I don't know. You asked the question. You said, what was the motive? That would be the motive.
People are going after this and categorizing now as this conspiracy video, but it's not a conspiracy video. And still, like, my mind goes back to when we had weapons of mass destruction, and then we spent trillions of dollars and countless American lives fighting a war over oil, like, and that being so much worse than just uploading a documentary online and saying, maybe you should scratch your head about this because stuff isn't adding up. I think it's kind of sad to see a lot of these, media outlets just attack this thing and try to put it off as some fake thing. I mean, Judd experience.
If it can't be censored, it has to be criticized. You say it can't be criticized?
No. I got this. What if this is a deeper level of conspiracy? What if the government, who's releasing all this crazy information now, there's so much finger pointing, they need something else to take some of the blame away from that. So they posted it and then removed it, knowing that would trigger some red flags, like, oh God, now they're censoring us. So now we're all focusing on the wrong topic. It's not the fact that
you're talking about bread and circus. So the idea of just distracting us with bullshit.
Totally. So we're not going to start injecting any disinfectants or thinking that somebody talking about over 50,000 deaths at the time could possibly be sarcastic on national television when talking about public health. Maybe this is that. Maybe this is the deflection, smoke and mirrors.
It's possible. I did start brushing my teeth with bleach, but okay. Again, I wasn't reacting against being criticized for sharing this. People can share their opinions, but what I was being attacked and being accused of being an anti-vaxxer and sharing information that was dangerous because it would lead to more infections.
I don't think that's fair. That's not a fair. That's
what I was reacting to. And then my second post was about, like, okay, now we're advocating censorship. And it was mainly just to my friends that who consider themselves liberals, but will jump on this bandwagon of attacking people for sharing somebody else's different perspective. And that's, to me, I guess the COVID being the number one concern right now, but also number two, that we're evolving into this culture that will attack information if they don't agree with it and advocate for it being censored. That is us devolving into 1984, and that leads to things like burning books. Like if we see, for example, if you have the Communist
Which is from Fahrenheit 451, by the way.
Should we burn them both because we don't agree with the information presented in there? Or should we keep them available for someone that might want to read and hear what that perspective was? Not because it's going to agree with it. And there is the danger you could read Mein Kampf and turn into a white supremacist terrorist. There is that danger, but I don't think that we should advocate for the burning of every copy of Mein Kampf.
Yeah, and what's more dangerous, the Plandemic documentary or our government not supplying our hospitals with protective equipment for doctors and nurses?
Smoke and mirrors, bud.
I want to. We're approaching the 2-hour mark now, which is impressive. But I want to start winding it down. and because we've covered a lot in this conversation. I think anyone who's been watching this can kind of see why I really thought this was an important thing to talk about, because this is a really intense, passionate issue for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And I think that we've seen a lot of those perspectives here tonight, and very well articulated and researched by everyone here. And I think this is not the last that we've seen of this. This is a kind of storytelling. The Plandemic type of media is not going anywhere. This will not be the last you see of this. This will continue. And I think that one of the main themes that we've been talking about tonight is that censorship. What are we allowed to see and think about, right? Very important that whatever your point of view in the world is, I think we can all agree that it should be available to anyone, everywhere, all the time. I think we can all agree on that, right? I think that's fair.
I was reading the DMs, but I'd like to come back to that. You said that she stated that there are the microbes that can fight the disease. It's implied, not stated. Are there healing microbes in the sea and in the sand? Probably.
Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. So, maybe there are, maybe they're not. I, unless I'm mistaken, nobody here has a degree in microbiology.
Nope.
We should have somebody that comes on who can talk about that, because I would be very interested to learn about claims like that. So maybe we should do a follow-up, because Judd, I would like to know more about that. And there are people who have done like line by line fact checks of this documentary that are worth also reading, to get both sides, because I think Plandemic is a little bit inflammatory because it has a very specific and very unusual point of view that it makes very forcefully. And
I disagree.
some people,
It's not
I know, but it does. What I'm saying, it has a point of view that polarizes people, which is evident by the fact that we're having this conversation. So wherever you fall on where you believe the science that's presented there or not, it is still, it's outside the mainstream, and therefore it's incendiary a little bit, because it takes a very extreme position. There are extreme positions on the other side too, which is what Judd was just talking about. All the people piling on, being like, "This has to be destroyed, take it off YouTube." That's not true. That's not right either. There is a middle ground, which is that it should be available and it should be discussed. And if you're into it, you should be able to accept it, and if not, not. But I also want to and I think it's also fair to say that the thing that we keep coming back to in this conversation is money. Most conspiracy theories are founded around money. Who profits? Who's standing to make profit? And I think that at the end of the day, this is not just, it's not as much of a conspiracy as it's just like, this is how capitalism is, right? People are, you live in a capitalist society. You are inclined to find ways to make money however you can. If you are the CEO of a publicly traded company, especially a big pharma kind of company with a 9-figure annual gross revenue, then you have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit for your shareholders at the expense of your customers, by law. So that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just the law, and that's a systemic problem that we are seeing play out in our healthcare system in every area. Ask anybody. Ask Lee, who goes and gets cancer treatments. Like, what her bills look like.
Why are you not supporting presidential nominees who advocate for universal health care?
I do.
Oh, you do?
I did. Well, I did.
Yeah,
back when that primary was a thing a million years ago.
The U.S. government actually also, the U.S. government has an estimate for how much a human life is worth. I think it's either $4 or $7 million.
10 million.
10 million?
10 million, yeah.
Yeah, so that's been a number that has been determined by our government and says your life is worth $10 million.
Yeah, awesome.
So once you do that, everything else becomes about money.
I'm worth $10 million?
Yeah,
that's dope.
As a result,
I thought I was $20.
I think it's fair to say, I think a fair takeaway is that, like, whether you are in favor of a Medicare for all, universal healthcare solution or not, there are arguments on both sides. I think that this is a very strong argument in favor of of universal healthcare access, and removing the capitalist profit motive away from medicine. I think we are seeing it play out in real time. I think the main story from the whole COVID-19 mess is going to be that privatized healthcare is a bad idea. It was a bad idea then, it's a bad idea now, and it's going to be a bad idea forever. And we're just going to see this play out again and again. And I'm hoping that the Overton window on our politics is shifting in the right direction. But before we end tonight, I want to give everyone a chance to put in a last word. Keep it brief. We do want to wrap up soon. Josh, you first.
Sure. Yeah. The first time I was on the show, we talked about this idea of science saving us and looking at science as kind of this miracle that can that we can invest in, we can rely on to help our lives. And we do that with the government as well. I guess I'll just piggyback on what we were just talking about with the value of our lives. Money is being spent constantly to, for our health and for our safety and for our education. And, I think it's just important for people to be mindful of the ways that we're enraptured in kind of these different institutions in our lives. And when we look to science, we also have to understand that science operates a lot of ways like a business. I mean, certain things get funded because that's what the people want. If you look at the things that do get funded more than others, it's because, there's been a poll or there's a greater need for something to be funded more so than something else. Science is sadly underfunded, just the same way arts in schools is super underfunded. When you put that up again, healthcare is underfunded. And when you put that up against what we're hearing about billionaires getting richer and more people, making a profit, those up against each other create a lot of angry people, where people feel disenfranchised. People feel like they're not getting a fair shake. And, a documentary like this definitely plays into a lot of people's, uneasiness. But I definitely don't agree that it should be censored or taken down. I think everybody should watch it and make their own opinion of it.
Judd?
So, I mean, fear is a really dangerous weapon, and we've seen what happens when you make Americans fearful. A terrorist cell or some other group killed 3,000 New Yorkers in the 9/11 attack, and we went ahead and killed at least 1 million Iraqis. So I think, they found that the most effective weapon to manipulate American citizens is fear, and just wonder who would profit from us being fearful. And I think it's very clear. It's big pharma, it's massive corporations, it's Amazon, it's whoever owns Instacart, which is probably Facebook or something. Also that these, these giant corporations now that control how and where we communicate and interact with one another on these platforms like Zoom that we're using now, or social media, or our cell phones. So I think, we do well to be alarmed, but not always, not always about the right thing. And that, that we need to continue to have different opinions. That it's important that, when the government, when George Bush's government told us we needed to invade Iraq and Afghanistan to preserve our freedoms, that some of us went out on the streets and protested against it. And I think it's important that some of us think differently. They were telling us we've got to kill 1 million Iraqis and God knows how many Afghanis and Pakistanis and whatnot to protect our freedoms. A lot of people kind of got brainwashed into thinking that was the right thing. And now retrospectively, we know it was for oil and a huge waste of human life. My final thought would be, I've been reading a lot of Nietzsche, and I still don't know how to say his name. Actually, I don't know if that's right.
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. I guess it depends.
Niche.
In Germany, it was like Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
Anywho, I'm really into it. I
Thank you.
will. Yeah, you guys should start reading some of his stuff. But one of the quotes that I really like by his, and I don't know whether it's accurate or not, just like Plandemic, but it says, quote, "There are no facts, comma, only interpretations, period."
Well, that's enough said there, right? That's this entire conversation in a nutshell. Alex.
And that kind of relates to what I said a little bit earlier about positivism and post-positivism too. It is about interpreting information.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's a great quote to think about.
Yeah, and also remember, they've been telling us smoking's going to kill us for years, but now they're saying it's keeping us from getting coronavirus. So on that note,
Stick to what you know.
Well
Stick
said.
to what you know.
Alex.
Final thoughts. I think just going back to, we call it conspiracy theories, but really it's just people, afraid of, information and not really sure how to make of it. I mean, people do weird things in grief. So it's hard to make light of that. I mean, I don't want to make anyone feel bad by having them believe in something that may be a little wacky. And I don't think censorship is the way to go ever, of course, but I think there is something to be said about, preventing people from making false accusations and that could hurt more people. I think that's also really important. However you look at it, whether it's something about smoking, whether it's something about injecting bleach in you, which, obviously don't do. It should be, you shouldn't allow people who are in positions of authority to make claims that are false and could hurt other people. That's all I think that should be happening.
Fair enough. And Lee, you get the last word.
I think that I was very unprepared for this because I didn't watch the movie. But I'm going to say,
and yet you brought a great
personal
perspective to this conversation anyway.
Yeah. But I'm going to say from a personal side, I still think that we need to trust science. We need to trust modern medicine. We need to look back and look 10, 20 years ago, what I have was a death sentence. So somebody is going to the right place, to the right research to cure people. So I don't know. I'm still going to go for, I'm going to listen to the doctors.
That is very well said, and I'm very glad that we get to end it there. Adam, is there any final thoughts you have?
Thank you guys so much for being a part of this episode today. I really appreciate it. I like all the perspectives.
We got the right crew for this conversation. This is absolutely perfect. You guys are lovely, and I love you guys so much. You're just so great. This has been Corona with Lime. Every Monday and Thursday, usually at 8:30 p.m. Tonight was at 9, special time. But you can see why. It was a double header. It was a full 2-part episode. It's a 2-hour super. It's like a series, like almost like a season finale. This is not, but it's like that.
I'm gonna have to get costumes for when I come on next time, so I can you can have more of a variety.
You can come on dressed however you want to, sir. You can just have a cape and a giant hat. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Until
I think there should
Plandemic
be a
2.
conspiracy theorist on every show, though.
It makes everything more fun.
Yeah.
I totally agree. But you guys are all great sports. Thank you very much. Corona with Lime every Monday and Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Josh, Judd, Alex, and Lee, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is so great. And as always, we'd love to end with a little video clip montage. We found an especially silly one, care of my brother-in-law, Todd, who sent this to me, and I think it's the funniest thing I'd seen in a while. Especially if you're a film nerd, since we were talking about a movie today, I thought like a film homage montage would be appropriate. So we're going to end it with that. So with that, I invite everybody on the Zoom call to just to stick around through the end of it, and then we'll end. But thank you, everybody, so much for watching, and have a great night. Stay safe, and we'll see you all soon.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
One love. Thanks for having me.
you heard the news?
What's the news?
We're fucked.
Is it a virus? Yeah.
How does it spread? Is it airborne?
We don't know.
What did he just say?
He said there's a storm coming in.
Something is amiss. Put John Lee.
Everybody just relax.
It's death out there.
It's the end of the world.
All of you, go into the kitchen and wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Look at you. You're not even wearing your mask now. Where's your mask?
There's gotta be a way of killing it. How do we do it?
You're gone.
It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop until you are dead.
And it gets worse.
You're out of toilet paper.
We need to go grocery shopping, Dad.
I'll get us something to eat. I'll meet you back here.
I've been thinking everyone should prepare their own meals.
They quarantined us.
The only thing that can get a bit trying is a tremendous sense of isolation.
Well, that just happens to be exactly what I'm looking for.
He's locked himself in his room and he won't answer the door.
All we do now is hole up till spring, wait for the rescue team.
Have a nice cold pint and wait for all this to blow over.
I'm going to board up the windows and the doors.
If we break quarantine, we could all die.
Everybody is dead.
Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired.
They can start searching for us.
Why don't you just keep calm?
Growing scarcity of food is causing them to ignore their basic survival instincts. Social de-evolution appears complete.
Who are you calling?
The president.
What did he say?
But as you see, it's a beautiful day. The beaches are open, and people are having a wonderful time.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
We are all crisis alert. The situation is normal again.
I'm very confused.
So, as a species, we're fundamentally insane. Why do you think we invented politics and religion?
I don't want to stay out here anymore. I want to come back inside.
Let's go outside. I need some air.
The man said to stay indoors. Fuck the man!
The only way we're gonna help ourselves is to seek rescue. We're going out.
Are you sure we're doing the right thing, Tom?
We're about getting out of here. The television said that's the right thing to do.
Sure, there's no way I can talk you out of this. There's nothing about that. What if you're wrong? What about the government? What do they do?
There's no government.
Let's turn on the TV.
We depend on the summer people here for our very lives.
You are not going to have a summer unless you deal with this.
The poor and the underclass are growing. We are focused only on our own gain.
We are the infection.
Scientists always think in those kind of terms. It doesn't work that way. That's not how people really are.
We're going to draw a little bit of everybody's blood.
That's what brung it down on us. That's what brung down the wrath of God.
You want to see us punished?
For what?
For being young?
I don't believe you. You're both lying.
It's true.
You're lying. You're lying.
In order to cure, you must first understand.
Understand what?
There's a cure. How's it cured?
Wait.
Do you have any disinfectant?
Yes, I do.
I want you to inject yourself.
God, where did you hear that? President.
Okay, let's try, shall we? Get back!
Still no cure.
I'm afraid.
There's no reason to be afraid.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we've all got the same thing.
We're all in this together.
No matter what happens, we have to stay together.
I can't lie to you about your choices. But you have my sympathies.